Chapter 9. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here because Hera stinks. If there is anything worse than hearing death, and hearing those words while having your flap poked, can you be more specific? I actually want to ask, can you make all this go away, and can you also stop poking me? But I doubted I would get either wish. Cross references, Ella said. Sorry? Turquin's tomb, she said. The burning maid's words. Frank told me Apollo faces death in Turquin's tomb unless the doorway to the soundless god is opened by Belladonna's daughter. I know the prophecy. I sort of wish people would stop repeating it. What exactly cross-reference Turquin and Bellona and soundless god with Tyson's index? I turned to Frank, who seemed to be the only other comprehensible person in the room. Tyson has an index? Frank shrugged. He wouldn't be much of a reference book without an index. On the back by die, and Tyson called, still happily kicking his feet, waiting to be engraved with red-hot needles. Want to see? No, God, no. So, you cross-referenced. Yep, said Ella. No results for Bellona or the soundless god. She tapped the sides of her head. Need more words for those. But Turquin's tomb. Yep, found a line. She scuttled to the tattoo chair. Aristophanes trotted close behind, swatting at her wings. Ella tapped Tyson's shoulder blade. Here, Tyson giggled. A wildcat near the spinning lights, Ella read aloud. The tomb of Turquin with horses bright. To open this door, 254. Meow, said Aristophanes. No, Aristophanes, Ella said, her tone softening. You are not a wildcat. Beast purred like a chainsaw. I waited for more prophecy. Most of the Sibylline books read like the joy of cooking with sacrificial recipes to placate the gods in the event of certain catastrophe. Plague of locusts ruining your crops. Triceratops so fills with loaves of honey bread roasted over her altar for 3 days. Earthquake destroying the city. When Neptune comes home tonight, surprise him with 3 black bowls bathed in holy oil and burned in a fire pit with prigs of rosemary. But Ella seemed to be done reading. Frank, I said, did that make any sense to you? He frowned. I thought you would understand it. When would people realize that just because I was the god of prophecy didn't mean I understood prophecy? I was also the god of poetry. Did I understand the metaphors in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland? No. Ella, I said, could those lines describe a location? Yep. Close by, probably. But only to go in, look around, find out the right things and leave. Not to kill Turquinus Superbus. Nope, he's much too dead to kill. For that, need more words. Frank John picked at a Merle crown badge on his chest. Turquinus Superbus, the last king of Rome. He was considered a myth even back in Imperial Rome times. His tomb was never discovered. Why would he be just around us? In the neck of our woods? I finished. Probably the same reason Mount Olympus is hovering above New York or Camp Jupiter is in the Bay Area. Okay, that's fair, Frank admitted. Still, if the tomb of a Roman king was near Camp Jupiter, why would we just be learning about it now? Why the attack of the undead? I didn't have a ready answer. I'd been so fixated on Caligula and Commodus, I hadn't given much thought to Tarquinius Superbus. As evil as he might have been, Tarquin had been a minor league player compared to the Emperor. Nor did I understand why a semi-legendary, barbaric, apparently undead Roman king would have joined forces with the triumvirs. Some distant memory tickled at the base of my skull. It couldn't be a coincidence that Tarquin would make himself known just as Ella and Tyson were reconstructing the Sibylline book. I remember my dream of the purple-eyed entity, the deep voice that had possessed the Ernemoz in the tunnel. You of all people should understand the fragile boundary between life and death. The cut across my throat throbbed. Just once, for variety, I wished I could encounter a Tom where the occupants were actually dead. So, Ella, I said, you suggest we find this Tom? Yep, go in the Tom Raider for PC, PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, and Sega Saturn 1996, Toms of Atuan, Ursula Le Guin, Win, Athenian Press, 1971. I barely noticed the extraneous information this time. If I stayed here much longer, I'd probably start sticking in Eloise too, spouting random Wikipedia references after each sentence. I really needed to leave before that happened. We only go in to look around, I said, to find out the right things. Yep. And then come back alive. Staying alive. The Bee Gees. Second singles. Saturday Night Fever motion picture soundtrack, 1977. Right. And you're sure there's no more information in the Cyclops Index that might actually be helpful? Ella stared at Frank, then trotted over and sniffed his face. Firewood something. No, that's for later. Frank couldn't have looked more like a concerned animal if he'd actually turned into one. Ella, we don't talk about the firewood. That reminded me of another reason I liked Frank Jung. He, too, was a member of the I Hate Hera Club. In Frank's case, Hera had inexplicably tied his life force to a small piece of wood, which I'd heard Frank now carried around with him at all times. If the wood burned up, so did Frank. Such a typical controlling Hera thing to do. I love you and you're my special hero, and also here's your stick. When it burns, you die. Ha 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 ha. I disliked that woman. Ella ruffled her feathers, providing Aristophanes with lots of new targets to play with. Fire with something bridge, twice something. No, that's later. Need more words. Tyson needs a tattoo. Yay, said Tyson. Can you also do a picture of Rainbow? He's my friend. He's a fishbone pony. A rainbow is white light, Ella said, refracted through water drops. Also a fish pony, Tyson said. Humph, said Ella. I got the feeling I had just witnessed the closest the Harpy and Cyclops had ever came to having an argument. You two can go. Ella brushed us away. Come back tomorrow. Maybe 3 days. 8 days a week. Beatles. First UK release, 1964. Not sure yet. I was about to protest that we had only 4 days before Caligula's yacht arrived and Camp Jupiter suffered another onslaught of destruction. But Frank stopped me with a touch on the arm. We should go. Let her work. It's almost time for evening muster anyway. After the mention of firewood, I got the feeling he would have used any foul-level excuse to get out of that bookstore. My last glimpse of the special collections room was Stella holding her tattoo gun, etching steaming words on Tyson's back while the Cyclops giggled, "It tickles!" And Aristophanes used the Harpy's rough leather legs as scratching posts. Some images, like Cyclops tattoos, are permanent once burned into your brain. Frank hustled us back to camp as fast as my wounded gut would tolerate. I wanted to ask him about Ella's comments, but Frank wasn't in a talkative mood. Every so often, his hand strayed to the side of his belt, where a cloth pouch hung tucked beneath his scabbard. I hadn't noticed it before, but I assumed this was where he stored his Hera-cursed life-ending souvenir, Or perhaps Frank was somber because he knew what awaited us at evening muster. The legion had assembled for the funeral procession. At the head of the column stood Hannibal, the legion's elephant, decked in Kevlar and black flowers. Harnessed behind him was a wagon with Jason's coffin, draped in purple and gold. 4 of the cohorts had fallen into line behind the coffin, purple layers shifting in and out of the ranks. The 5th cohort, Jason's original unit, served as honor guards and torchbearers on either side of the wagon. Standing with them, between Hazel and Lavinia, was Mag McKenfrey. She frowned when she saw me and mouthed, "You're late." Frank jogged over to Raina, who was waiting at Hannibal's shoulder. The senior praetor looked drained and weary, as if she'd spent the last few hours weeping in private, then pulled herself back together as best she could. Next to her stood the Legion's standard bearer, holding aloft the eagle of the 12. Being close to the eagle made my hair stand on end. The golden icon reeked of Jupiter's power. The air around it crackled with energy. "Apollo." Rena's tone was formal, her eyes like empty wells. "Are you prepared for?" Question died in my throat. Everyone was staring at me expectantly. Did they want another song? No, of course. The Legion had no high priest, no pontifex maximums. Their former augur, my descendant Octavian, had died in a battle against Gaia, which I had a hard time feeling sad about, but that's another story. Jason would have been the next choice to officiate, but he was our guest of honor. That meant that I, as a former god, was the ranking spiritual authority. I would be expected to lead the funeral rites. Romance was all about proper etiquette. I couldn't execute myself without that being taken as a bad omen. Besides, I owed Jason my best, even if that was a sad Lester Papadopoulos version of my best. I tried to remember the correct Roman incumbent. "Dearly beloved? No. Why is this not different? No. Aha. Come, my friends," I said. "Let us escort our brother to his final feast." I suppose I did all right. No one looked scandalized. I turned and led the way out of the fort, and the entire legion followed in eerie silence. Along the road to Temple Hill, I had a few moments of panic. What if I led the procession in the wrong direction? What if I ended up in the parking lot of an Oakland Safeway? The golden eagle of the 12 loomed over my shoulder, charging the air with ozone. I imagined Jupiter speaking through its crackle and hum like the voice over shortwave radio. "Your fault, your punishment." Back in January, when I'd fallen to the earth, those words had seemed horribly unfair. Now, as I led Jason Grace to his final resting place, I believed that so much of what had happened was my fault. So much of it had never been made right. Jason had exacted a promise for me. "When you are God again, remember what it's like to be human." I meant to keep that promise if I survived long enough. But in the meantime, there were more pressing ways I needed to honor Jason. By protecting Camp Jupiter, defeating the Triumvirate, and, according to Ella, ascending into the tomb of an undead king. Ella's words rattled around my head. A wild cat near the spinning lights, the tom of Turquoise with horses bright, to open his door 254. Even for a prophecy, the lines seemed gerberous. The symbol of Kume had always been vague and verbose. She refused to take editorial direction. She'd written 9 entire volumes of sibling books. Honestly, who needs 9 books to finish a series? I secretly felt vindicated when she'd been unable to sell them to the Romans until she'd whittled them down to a trilogy. The other 6 volumes had gone straight into the fire when I froze. Behind me, the procession creaked and shuffled to a halt. Apollo? Raina whispered. I shouldn't stop. I was officiating Jason's funeral. I couldn't fall down, roll into a ball, and cry. That was a definite no-no. But Jason, Jupiter's gem short, why did my brain insist on remembering important facts at such inconvenient times? Of course, Tarquin had connected the Sibylline books. Of course, he would choose now to show himself and send an army of undead against Jupiter. And the symbol of Cumae herself. Was it possible Apollo? Raina said more insistent. I'm fine, I lied. One problem at a time. Jason's grace deserved my full attention. I forced down my turbulent thoughts and kept walking. When I reached Temple Hill, it was obvious where to go. At the base of Jupiter's temple stood an elaborate wooden pyre. At each corner, an honor guard waited with a blazing torch. Jason's coffin would burn in the shadow of our father's temple. That seemed bitterly appropriate. The Legion's cohorts fanned out in a semicircle around the pyre, the layers in their ranks glowing like birthday candles. The 5th cohort unloaded Jason's coffin and bore it to the platform. Cannonball and his funeral cart were led away. Behind the Legion, at the periphery of the torchlight, Ara's wind spirits swirled about, setting up folding tables and black tablecloths. Others flew in with drink pitchers, stacks of plates, and basket foods. No Roman funeral would be complete without a final meal for the departed. Only after the meal was shared by the mourners would the Romans consider Jason's spirit safely on its way to the underworld, immune from indignities like becoming a restless ghost or a zombie. When the legionnaires got settled, Raina and Frank joined me at the fire. You had me worried, Raina said. Is your wound still bothering? It's getting better, I said, though I might have been trying to assure myself it wasn't hurt. Also, why did she have to look so beautiful in the firelight? We'll have the killers look at it again, Frank promised. Why did you stop in the road? Just remembering something. Tell you later. I don't suppose you guys had any luck notifying Jason's family, Thalia? They exchanged frustrated looks. We tried, of course, Raina said. Thalia is the only earthly family he had, but with the communication problems, I nodded, unsurprised. One of the more annoying things the Triumvirate had done was to shut down all forms of magical communication used by demigods. Iris messages failed. Letters sent by wind spirits never arrived. Even mortal technology, which demigods tried to avoid anyway because of it attracted monsters, now wouldn't work for them at all. How the Empress had managed this, I had no idea. I wish we could wait for Thalia, I said, watching as the last of the 5th cohort pallbearers climbed down from the pyre. Me too, Raina agreed. But I know, I said. Roman funeral rites were meant to be performed as soon as possible. Cremation was necessary to send Jason's spirit along. It would allow the community to grieve and heal, or at least turn our attention to the next threat. Let's begin, I said. Raina and Frank rejoined the front line. I began to speak, the Latin ritual verses pouring out of me. I chanted from instinct, barely aware of the words' meanings. I had already praised Jason with my song. That had been deeply personal. This was just a necessary formality. In some corner of my mind, I wondered if this was how mortals felt when they used to pray to me. Perhaps their devotions had been nothing but muscle memory, recited by rote, while their minds drifted elsewhere, uninterested in my glory. I found that idea strangely understandable. Now that I was immortal, why should I not practice non-violent resistance against the gods too? I finished my benediction. I gestured for the array to distribute the feast. He placed the first serving on Jason's coffin so he could symbolically share the last meal with his brethren in the mortal world. Once that happened, and the pyre was lit, Jason's soul would cross the sticks, so Roman tradition said. Before the torches could be set on the wood, a plaintive howl echoed in the distance. Then another, much closer. An uneasy ripple passed through the assembled demigods. Their expressions weren't alarmed exactly, but definitely surprised, as if they hadn't planned on extra guests. Hannibal grunted and stamped. At the edges of our gathering, gray wolves emerged from the gloom. Dozens of huge beasts keening for the death of Jason, a member of their pack. Directly behind Ryan, on the raised steps of Jupiter's temple, the largest wolf appeared, her silvery hide glowing in the torchlight. I felt the legion hold its collective breath. No one knelt. When facing Lupa, the wolf goddess, guardian spirit of Rome, we don't knelt or show any sign of weakness. Instead, we stood respectfully, holding our ground as the pack bayed around us. At last, Lupa fixed me with her lamb yellow eyes. Curl of her lip, she gave me a simple order, come. Then she turned and paced into the darkness of the temple. Lena approached. Looks like the wolf goddess wants to have a private word, she frowned with concern. We'll get the feast started. You go ahead. Hopefully Lupa isn't angry or hungry.